Hello, in this tutorial I'll teach you how to create from scratch a page which has a form where the user can input some data and that data will be saved in a database table. So let's start. First thing to do is to log in our framework. By default it shows the advanced workspace where we can see that we have the default project that it comes with a demo installation, with the default indexed page, with no templates, no logic. So basically this is like an empty installation. So currently we have these tables because we already have the modules installed, but let's create a new table called animal. We'll choose to do that, the add table automatically, to do this faster. So we have done this before in the previous tutorial, so I'll not explain this in detail. So basically here we just created automatically a new table. Let's just add some other attributes like the name and the age of the animal. Where the name, I want this to be a short name, and age, I want this to be age 3. Okay, let's move this up here. Okay, perfect. So currently we already have our table sets, the table animal, and the next step now is to create the logic and then to create the page which will contain a form which will call then the business logic, which will then insert the corresponding information in this table. So let's see what are the records that we have in this current table. So currently it's a new table, so there are no records. Let's pass to the next step, which is the logic layer. So let's create here a new service called animal insert or something like that. So first thing to do is to create a service object. Let's call this animal service. Good standard to follow is to have the name of the service followed by the serviced keyword, and automatically we can see that it created here the file and the correspondent group of service. And in here now let's add a new service method called insert, and we can see that it opened by default the method service that we created called insert. And now let's create our own logic to receive some user input and insert that inputs into that database table that we created before called animal. So this service will receive two inputs, which will be the name and the age. We don't want the name to be null, so we want the name to be mandatory. The age, it could be null, okay, but if it is passed, we want this to be a tiny int. Okay, so the inputs are created. So now we want to create our own logic to insert that specific inputs into our database table. So first thing to do is to search here the corresponding task that we want to use to insert it, and we're going to use this one, execute dbDAO action. So we drag and drop to our canvas. Automatically it opens here the properties, and in here we want to choose the methods insert objects. After that we can see that it refresh here some attributes or some options for this specific method name, the insert object, and we'll click in this icon so we can load automatically the table that we created, which was the table animal. Okay, so by default it loads all the attributes of that table animal. Because we create this table animal automatically, the animal ID, it is an auto increment key, automatic primary key, so we don't need to have it here because the system will create it automatically. So we can just erase this one. And now for these ones we want to pass the local variable coming from the input when we call this service. So all the variables coming from that we pass as the input when we call this service are in the data variable. So what we want to do here is to call data name and update. Same thing for age, where in here we want to show the age. For the create date, we'll use a new variable, so we'll create the current date of the system. So we'll just put here a variable and we'll create this variable before we call this task. So for the user ID, currently we don't have any logged in user, so we'll just put 0. Okay, and we want to then, after the system call this function, this will return the specific primary key of that record. So we want to put that ID, that specific ID, into a variable, which we're gonna call animal ID. Okay, so we can save this and we can now create the data variable that we are passing in here. So let's create this data variable here. Okay, so to do that, let's go here to the logic part and let's drag and drop this task called define date variable. We're gonna put here the format YMWD, which means the year dash the month dash the day, where the year is a 4 digits attributes, the month is a 2 digits number, and the D it's a 2 digits number. And we want to return these dates into a variable called date. We just save, it's done. We just connect these both tasks here. We can sort this to be more beautiful and more understandable. In here we can change the label saying create current date, something like that, so we can see here. In here we can change this label to insert new animal, something like that. And now this service we want to return that specific animal ID, so we just grab the return task here, where in here we're gonna choose the existing variable, in here the existing variable, which is the animal ID that we created in this task here. We just do update, and here we can put return new animal ID, and we just connect these both tasks and it's done. We already have our service done. Basically what this service will do is we'll receive these two parameters, the name and the age, where the age is a numeric field and can be null, where the name it is a string. Well, we can pass here a string, it's fine, we can just select here string or a varchar or whatever, and cannot be null. When we call then this service, so it will pass these two parameters, automatically create the current dates and put this in a variable called date, and then we'll call this task, which basically will call the insert object methods for the animal table, where we will pass the input name attributes, the input age attributes, that it is in here, these two guys, and then we'll put in the created date the date variable that we create in here, this local variable, and the created user and the modified user will be 0 because we don't have any logged in. We'll create a page with no authentication, so this is just dummy, so it will be just 0, and the modified date will have the local variable date too. Okay, done. Okay, so all of this is done, is saved, so we can pass for the next step, which is create a page. So in here we can just use this indexed page, which is already created, which is a default, and we can see what currently this page has. Basically it only has a default template, which is this template here. So next step, what we can do is we can just install a new template from our store. So we just do import template, we install this template, then we choose the template, and now we can start building our form in here. So what we can do is we can just drag a div in here, then we can drag a form in here, inside of this form we'll put a bunch of fields. What we can do now, so basically you can put the name and the age. Where this field here will be a numeric field. Okay, this will be the age. This will be the name. Okay, and now we can put here some title like insert new animal, whatever. Well, we could make this more beautiful, like in a div or in a spam, something like that. So we can put here some classes, tests, secondary, something like that. Oops, this is with all. Okay, and in here we need to put the button. Okay, so now this button, we want to add an event to this button. Let's just collapse this one. In the events group, on click, we want to add an event here in the form, trigger form, which the event calls add resource item. And this add resource item, it will execute the resource, a specific resource that is defined in the form. That's what we're going to do in the next step. Basically, it's the add resource. So for now we just do update. So when we click in the button, it will execute the corresponding resource. So we didn't define yet the resource, so let's do this now. So we click here form, we go here to the widgets, and in here we select form, and in the resource, you can collapse this guy, and here in the add resource we need to select the specific resource that we're gonna call this logic service that we created before. So where are defined the resources? The resources are defined in the main settings in the resource tab. So let's add a new action, which will basically call a business logic service, which was the business logic service that we created, which was this one, the insert. Automatically it loads here, and we want to pass the correspondent values that the user will pass when the user fills up this form. So so where are that variables? So basically these variables will be passed in a post variable called attributes, and with the correspondent name of each field, which in this case is the name, and in this case it is the age. Okay, so this will execute automatically that specific business logic service, and we want to put here the name of the resource, which is insert person. Okay, so now we can go back here, we can choose that resource that we created. However, it doesn't appear automatically, so we need to click refresh here, and voila, here it is, insert person. Okay, additionally we can put here a success message saying animal. Sorry, so basically I mistake here, I put insert person, I wanted to put insert animal, and in here the same thing, insert animal. So animal, so let's go back to the success message. So animal inserted successfully, error, animal not inserted, something like that in the case of the error message. Okay, So now we can save this and let's do a summary of what we did. So in the database, what we did was to create a table animal with these attributes. In the logic, we create a new service called insert, which basically it creates a data variable with the current date, and it receives two inputs, the name and the age of an animal, and then it inserts, calls a task, which is the db-dow task, which will execute and insert a query to the database, to the animal table, passing the corresponding inputs of that service, and then returns the new primary key, the new animal ID that the database created. And then in the interface we create a page which contains basically a form, a very simple form. So we could add here some CSS, will not do this, so this is just to show you a simple example. Well, we can just do this very fast here, just add some classes here, saying like form control, something like that. Form control, and here it's a form group. So basically we could add like a bunch of different classes or CSS to make this more beautiful. It doesn't really matter for this example. So we create here our form. Basically the button will trigger the add resource defined in the form element, and the form element has a resource called add resource called insert animal, which is defined in here, which basically will call a business logic service, which was the business logic service that we created here. Well, additionally there is something missing here, so we just want this resource to be executed when the resource is called, not every time that this page is loaded, so only when this resource is called. So to do that we just go here and we put here a specific condition saying when the variable resource is equal to this name, the insert animal, that's when you execute this resource here. So we can save this, and now when we preview this page, it loads by default our form, and when we put the name and the age and we click button, it will insert automatically a new record in that table. So we can check in the table if we do manage records. Currently we have the record that we inserted. We can insert a new one, something like this. If we refresh this, we can see that it puts another record. And that's it. Basically this is a way to show you how can you create forms in the presentation layer, and then based in that input, based in the user input data, we can trigger business logic services. In this case, this business logic service, what did was basically to insert that user input into the database. But instead of doing that, maybe we could send an email. To send an email, we have a task here, which is this one, where basically we needed to drag and drop the task here and fill up these correspondent attributes. Or we could do something else, like trigger a third-party service or whatever. This is like basically a manual process just to show you how easy it is to do this in basically no code and low code. There is an easy way to do this faster, which is basically if you go here, let's create a new page called easier, which will be an easier method to do what we did here manually. We can do this in an automatic way. How? Basically we create a new page, we select the templates, and then from here basically we just grab the table and we drag and drop to the correspondent region, and automatically we say that we want to show a form for that specific table, a form that will add that record, and we do proceed. automatically the system will create a form for us by default to create all the resources, all the business logic services, all the validation that we didn't do in our manual process, but we should have done it, but we didn't do. So the system creates all these steps for us automatically in just a few seconds, as you can see in here. So if we save this guy and if we preview this page, the easier page, we can see that it creates a much more beautiful form, where in here we can put a new name and the corresponding age, and when we add, we can see that it adds successfully and automatically it resets the form. So if we go to our animal table, we do manage resource, we can see here that it had correctly that correspondent information. And voila, that's it. So this is a very simple tutorial to show you how to create an internet page where the user can input its data and you can do whatever you want with that data. Thank you very much.